Hello, this is Richard Wilson. I'm coming to you from beautiful but frigid Zurich, Switzerland today, and I wanted to share with you some tips on negotiating book contracts. I just got done negotiating a book contract. I've written about 10 books now. This will be my third book that's actually published through a large publisher. But what I wanted to share with you is just some tips on negotiating book contracts. There's some things now that I've learned that I really wish I knew the first time I went through this. And I even spoke with a few people that had published books, and they were basically just encouraging me to be excited about the opportunity and sign the contract if I get it and go forward. And I really wish, I'd gotten just a few tips on what to look out for in the contracts, to kind of protect myself more. So first off, with any contract, whoever writes the contract wins, period. Contracts are written to serve the person who wrote them. They're not meant to be equal and balanced. That's your job to push back and say, wait a minute here, this looks like it's only written to protect you and my interests are not even talked about here. So I'm going to give you some areas where you should push back a little bit, see what they say. These are common areas where you can push back. Usually this is not going to break the deal. If the publisher has given you a contract and you negotiate in these areas, be fair and relatively flexible, and you're not going to lose the contract because you suggested one or two changes. That's not going to happen. One thing here to remember is that with all contracts, they're legal agreements. So if you see anything that's a potentially big risk or liability or any questions about the contract, you should speak with a lawyer, an attorney. This is definitely not legal advice. This is just really high level red flags to look out for in a contract. So here they are. First thing is just to watch out for the percentages they're offering you. Many times first-time authors are only offered 3 to 5% or 7%. Typically, maybe you could start at that level, but after getting past selling a couple thousand copies, you should request 10 or 12 or 15% royalties. It could be that on your first contract you don't have much negotiating power, but at least if you're selling more than 5,000 copies for them, you should be getting at least 10% in my opinion, unless there's some strategic partnership going on where the commissions need to be shared with 3 or 4 different parties or 2 or 3 different parties and not just you. Another thing to look at is the next book rights. Oftentimes publishers want access to the next book you're going to write, and they want 60 days to review it, think about it, decide whether to give you an offer on that manuscript or not. The problem there is that 60 days pass with some books that need to be written very quickly. That's the difference of getting the book out before your competitor or not. So limit that scope to 2 weeks or 4 weeks, 14 days or 30 days, because you don't want to be sitting on a book idea for 2 months before you even know whether you can take it to another publisher or not, or whether you're going to go forward it with one person or not. You could start writing the book not knowing who it's going to be published through. That'd be my suggestion. But you should, just change the contract to say 2 weeks or 30 days. It will benefit you. Another thing to look at is try to get review copies. If it's your first book, it might be hard to do this again, but you're going to sell more books if you can get journalists and PR professionals and people in your industry to review the book, put a review on Amazon.com, review the book to give you a testimonial, review the book so that they can put something out in their magazine or newspaper about it. So try to get 50 or 100 review copies. In the past, I've been able to secure up to 400 review copies for some books I've come out with. So it's something you definitely want to do. Otherwise, you're going to have to use your own money to pay for a book and then ship it to somebody. So you'll be out the price of your book plus the shipment of that, or if you get the books for free, then all you have to do is pay for shipping and you can get the book to them very inexpensively. I didn't do that with one of my books and ended up having to pay 50% of the book price. So $50 book, I had to pay $25 per book plus shipping. So I spent $3,000 of my own money getting some review copies out, which I could have gotten, for probably $300 if I just requested more review copies up front. Another 2 more tips is the non-compete section. Oftentimes book publishers have clauses that say things like, if you want to write another book in this industry, you have to get written permission from us first. And there's no time limit on that non-compete clause. So for the rest of your life, apparently, you're supposed to have written permission from them before you publish a book in the industry. It might say things like if you publish anything else in the industry, some things that are just very one-sided. For example, it probably would not be fair if they probably would not want to sign a contract with you if you told the publisher, that they're not allowed to publish another book in the industry unless they've asked you permission, because it might compete with the book that you've written. So if you look at it from that point of view, it does seem very one-sided. So really read through the contract and make sure there's not too many things like that are really one-sided, or just don't sign the contract, or see if you can balance it out a little bit further. Many times what I've done is, if you actually talk to the actual people you're working with inside the publisher, they're very fair and reasonable people. It's usually just the legal department putting together the best contract possible for this huge corporation. So if you talk to them and say, okay, well in the future I might write books on these 15 topics, which ones of these would be deemed competitive, then try to have that added in the contract, or at least in an email, so you have some sort of written evidence that they've somewhat approved these other book ideas, and they're not going to stop you from writing the books you want to write in the industry. So something to consider and look at and really watch out for in the contracts. It seems like an area of kind of unmanaged risk. If you sign contracts saying that you're not going to do anything unless you get written permission, it seems kind of overly restrictive to me. The last thing is time length. Within the contract, just look at every single component of it and see what the time restraints are. When the manuscript is due, what happens if you don't get it in time, what if you send in the manuscript and you don't hear back from them, what happens if they say it needs edits and you don't get back to them quick enough. Just make sure it's reasonable with your work schedule, your travel schedule. I remember in one contract I signed, there was something saying that if I got something physically in the mail and didn't respond in 2 weeks, that there'd be some punishment, and I had to change the contracts. I told them, sometimes I travel for 3 weeks straight, and I'm in Europe and Asia, and there's no way to even get the thing in the mail for a month, so there's no way I could comply with that and honestly sign an agreement to that point. So to summarize all of this, I've really found that people are very reasonable when you push back on contracts and say, you know what, these are the 6 issues I have, can we change these? Usually they'll change 3 or 4 out of the 6. The contract is better off, you've cut out some of the risk for yourself, and really I think that's common nowadays. If you sign a contract without making any changes, then you're probably getting taken, or you're taking on extra risk you don't need to. So just be a little bit careful with that, stuff that I didn't know in the past. If you're looking to publish a book, I really hope that these suggestions help you along the way. It's Richard Wilson, coming to you from Zurich, Switzerland, and I'll keep in touch.